This is the tipped wage war happening in Chicago right now, and how a single vote on April 15th could directly impact food trucks, street vendors, and the people working inside them. This is the story of a political fight between Brandon Johnson and the Chicago City Council, and why it matters for every mobile food business trying to survive in the city. It starts in 2023, when Chicago voted to phase out the tipped subminimum wage through the One Fair Wage ordinance. The plan was to gradually bring tipped workers up to the full minimum wage of $16.60 by 2028. For traditional restaurants, that meant adjusting pricing models and labor costs over time. But for food trucks and street vendors, the situation is different. These are smaller operations, smaller teams, tighter margins, less room to absorb sudden increases in labor costs. And unlike full-service restaurants, many food trucks don't rely on tipping in the same structured way. Some do, some don't, and many operate in a gray area where pricing, wages, and tips are constantly being balanced just to stay profitable. So when the city set this plan in motion, it didn't just affect servers in dining rooms, it created pressure across the entire food ecosystem, including the street level. For a while, the policy moved forward. Then on March 18, 2026, everything shifted. The Chicago City Council voted 30-18 to freeze the scheduled wage increases. That decision immediately changed the trajectory. For food truck operators, this wasn't just a political headline. It introduced uncertainty. If wages continue rising, costs go up. If they freeze, the long-term plan disappears. Either way, planning becomes harder. Just 1 week later, Mayor Brandon Johnson vetoed the freeze, calling it tone deaf. This was his third veto since taking office, and it made one thing clear: this wasn't just about policy anymore. It was a direct confrontation between the mayor and the council. Now the situation is on a clock. Supporters of the freeze have 9 days to find 4 more alderpersons to override the veto. That vote is set for April 15th. And that's where food trucks and street vendors get pulled directly into the middle. Because while this debate is framed around restaurant workers, the economic pressure it's tied to affects everyone in the food space. According to the Illinois Restaurant Association, product costs are up 31% since 2020 due to tariffs and supply chain shocks. That matters for food trucks just as much as it does for restaurants. Ingredients cost more, equipment costs more. Everything that goes into running a mobile kitchen has gotten more expensive. At the same time, the industry is already under strain. In just the first half of 2025, 496 Chicago restaurants closed. And while food trucks operate differently, they exist in the same ecosystem. When restaurants close, it signals broader stress across the entire food economy. A survey of about 200 full-service restaurants found that 89% had already raised menu prices and 79% had cut employee hours since the tipped wage increases began. Now apply that pressure to a food truck. There's no large dining room to offset costs, no massive menu to spread margins across. Every decision hits harder. Raise prices too much and customers walk away. Cut hours and service slows down. Reduce staff and operations become harder to maintain. This is where the wage debate becomes real for street-level businesses. Because the question isn't just whether workers should earn more, it's whether small operators can keep up with the pace of change. But that's only one side of the argument. Supporters of the wage increases point to a different set of data. They argue that the industry isn't collapsing because of wage policy. Nearly 1,600 new retail food establishments have been licensed in Chicago in recent years, and restaurant license renewal rates actually rose in 2025. From that perspective, the market is still growing. They also point to other factors driving closures: tariffs on imported ingredients and equipment, immigration enforcement raids that have scared off workers and customers, and lingering debt from the pandemic. In this view, the wage policy is not the root problem, it's one piece of a much larger economic puzzle. And for food trucks and street vendors, that distinction matters. Because if wages aren't the main issue, then freezing them doesn't solve the real challenges. It just delays the pressure. But if wages are a major factor, then continuing the increases could accelerate the strain on small operators who already have limited flexibility. That's why this vote is so critical, because it doesn't just decide a policy, it determines which version of the problem the city is going to act on. Either the council overrides the veto and freezes the increases, or the mayor's veto holds and the city continues moving toward full minimum wage for tipped workers. For food trucks and street vendors, neither outcome is simple. If wages continue rising, operators may need to adjust pricing, staffing, or even their entire business model. If wages are frozen, workers may continue relying on tips in a system that's already unpredictable. And for customers, this plays out in real time. Menu prices, portion sizes, service speed, availability of vendors, all of it connects back to the same underlying pressure. That's what makes this more than just a political fight. It's a decision point for the entire street food economy in Chicago. And it all comes down to April 15th. Because once that vote happens, the direction is set. And every food truck, every vendor, and every worker will have to adjust to whatever comes next.